Hey everybody, and welcome to a special Halloween episode of Superheroes, Movies, and Superhero Movies. Today we're going to talk about Evil Dead 2, directed by Sam Raimi, starring Bruce Campbell, written by Scott Spiegel and Sam Raimi, and I believe it was released in 1987. And it was a sequel, obviously, / remake of Evil Dead 1.
I didn't know it was
The Evil Dead.
Right, the first one's called The Evil Dead, and then the second one's just called Evil Dead 2.
Right.
And I had heard that it was a remake / spoof of the first one, but that was confirmed to me today, actually, by an article that I read about Evil Dead 2, which was interesting to find since we were planning on doing this podcast. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the first Evil Dead, I didn't talk about this in the article, but from what I've heard, the first Evil Dead was a true horror film, or it was intended to be.
Right.
And audiences just thought it was ridiculous.
Right.
And laughed at it.
The first one?
Yeah.
I thought it was kind of a hit. Was it not a hit?
I think that's why they chose to do the spoof. You know, I mean, you're right, it made
money.
But
it didn't scare people?
$900,000 to make.
90,000.
Was it 90?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right, it was. 90,000, and then it ended up making 2.5 million.
Yes.
I think that's
correct.
So I mean, yeah, that's a good return.
Right.
But I thought I remembered hearing that people just thought it was kind of, they laughed at it.
That's possible.
And then the first Evil Dead came out when? 81?
81. Mm-hmm.
So they didn't come out with another sequel for 6 years.
Well, they made a movie in between. Sam Raimi did. Well, Sam Raimi and Bruce Campbell, I guess.
With the Coen brothers?
Yeah, the Coen brothers wrote it, called Crime Wave, and Sam Raimi directed it, and that did not do very well.
Right.
And I actually watched a trailer for that movie today, and it does not look very good. So I
thought you had watched it.
No, I've never. It's kind of, well, up until recently, I think it's been kind of hard to find. I think it just got re-released on Blu-ray. Mm-hmm. But up until then, I think maybe you could find a VHS of it floating around out there or something. But it really wasn't. It wasn't wide released, I don't think, and it just didn't get like a DVD release ever until this Blu-ray came out.
Interesting.
I could be wrong, but I've never been able to find it.
Well, in that article, they also said that that movie was a flop, and this was kind of the movie that they were like, well, we've got to make this something, or we're done.
Or the careers are over. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. And the path that they chose was so interesting. I mean, they intended to do a slapstick horror film, which had never been done before. And this just kind of goes to show Sam Raimi's genius, especially at the time. Just because everyone was telling him, you're out of your minds. And people are going to be walking out of the theater.
Yeah.
But he was very persistent about it.
I thought about that when I was watching it again, and I was thinking, I wonder if at any point during the making of this movie, they all kind of stopped and looked at each other, and they were like, what are we doing?
I'm sure.
Like, is anybody going to see this? Is anybody going to like this?
It was a major risk.
Yeah.
But apparently when they took the screenplay in, they wanted to do it. Mm-hmm. So
there was a producer, Dino De Laurentiis, or however you say his name, I'm not really sure, who I think backed this movie. I think he's credited as a producer, and
wasn't he a producer on the original The Evil Dead?
That's very possible. You know, the original Evil Dead I've seen, but I think I've only seen it once, and it was a long time ago. Evil Dead 2, though, was the first movie of the Evil Dead trilogy that I had seen.
I think me too. It was either that or Army of Darkness, but I think it was Evil Dead 2.
I remember it was, I was about 18 or 19, and I had driven up to Nashville to hang out with a friend of mine. and she was in college, and so she had me. I think we were going to go to like a concert the next day or something. So she asked her male friend if I could sleep on like his dorm room floor for the night, and he was cool. He was like, "Yeah, sure." And then like while I was hanging out in his dorm room, he was talking to me, and Evil Dead 2 came up, and he was like, "You've never seen Evil Dead 2?" And he immediately like popped the VHS in the VCR, and we watched Evil Dead 2 that night.
Had you heard of it?
I'd heard of it, and I think I even remember the cover, because at that time I was probably working at Blockbuster already, and I know I'd seen the cover before with the skull, with the eyeballs kind of looking at you to the side.
Right.
And I've never really been a huge horror fan, and so I think that the cover of that movie made me never really want to see it. Not because I thought it was going to be scary or anything, just because I thought it kind of looked dumb. So,
Sure. It's called Evil Dead.
Yeah. And so I had no idea that it was actually like a horror comedy. And so he popped it in that night. And I do kind of remember being like, this is crazy. Like I did not know what to expect. And the way it ended, I loved the way it ended. And so I think very shortly after that, either I went back home and went back to work and rented immediately Army of Darkness or something, but
when he said you haven't seen Evil Dead 2, were you not like, what about Evil Dead 1?
I did. I think I do remember asking. I was like, well, I haven't seen Evil Dead 1 yet. Do I need to see that? And he was like, no. So,
which is true.
Yeah.
Which is true.
And that's why I consider it almost more of a remake than a sequel, because I honestly don't. You just watched Evil Dead 1. So you can fill me in on this. I don't remember how it ends. Spoiler alert, I guess, for Evil Dead 1 for anybody listening. But if his character survives in the first movie, which I'm assuming he does, why in the world would he go back to that cabin? And so I just always assumed it was kind of more of a reboot or a remake.
It was.
Yeah.
It and they said that, and they say that in the article too. And it has to be, because it's not the way that Evil Dead 1 ended. Mm-hmm. The Evil Dead ended. It's the way that Evil Dead 2 continues. Yeah, like you said, spoiler alert for the end of the Evil Dead. It's just like, basically they changed the first 5 minutes of Evil Dead 2 is a recap
of the first movie,
but it's not at the same time, because they totally change everything. It's just in the beginning of Evil Dead 2, it's just him and his girlfriend,
right? And in Evil Dead 1, it's a party, it's a group of people, right?
Right. So they changed that up, and then it ends kind of the same, where she becomes possessed, and then the camera. We'll talk about the cinematography, about the cameras going through the woods, which is awesome. Mm-hmm. That happens at the end, just like it does in Evil Dead 2. In fact, I thought it was the same footage, but it's not, because there's some holes in the door in the first one that aren't there in the second one. But
gotcha.
Anyway, it goes, and at the end of the Evil Dead, it knocks Bruce. It just kind of goes up to Bruce Campbell's face, Ash's face, and he's like screaming, and then it goes to black.
Oh, okay. So it's almost kind of implied that he might die, but you don't see it, so it's
right. And then in Evil Dead 2, it just knocks him like a mile into the woods, and then he bashes into a tree.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. Okay, so the whole him coming to the house in the beginning of Evil Dead 2 is not him going to the cabin again, it's him going to the cabin the first time.
Right.
I see. So then, I guess it is definitely a remake then, because where are all those other people?
Well, it's not a... It's not a remake, because it's the events that happen after the first movie.
Right.
But they totally change.
So it can be considered Evil Dead 2. It's almost like, don't worry about the first movie. We'll tell you what happens in the first movie.
Right.
Don't worry about it. That's funny. Interesting. I didn't really realize that. Jumping right into it, the first note that I wrote, which is a couple of minutes into the movie, is I love the way Sam Raimi uses the camera to be the evil force. I don't know what you would call it. I don't know if it's like a demon or if it's supposed to be some sort of ghost or something.
Yeah, it never really shows.
Yeah, it's some sort of evil force. But I love it. You see it like always going through the woods very quickly. And there's a scene where it's chasing Ash through the house. And there's even like this weird secret corridor in the house that he like squeezes in between walls and stuff. But then I love that Ash outruns the ghost, and the ghost like as the camera is just panning left and right trying to find Ash and like doesn't know where he went. Yeah. That's one of like the first kind of big jokes in the movie, I think.
Yeah.
And, it's
not to mention that Ash he actually bursts through a door.
Yeah, while he's running away.
Like a Superman.
Doesn't even open it. He just runs right through it. I noticed that too.
I actually did not take any notes.
No notes at all, huh?
No notes.
Well, I have a few. But I will admit that I rewatched the movie today. I got a little sidetracked here and there, but this was actually, I think, the first time I'd seen it in maybe about 10 years. So I didn't realize it had been that long, but when I was thinking about it, I don't think the last time I watched it was... I think I was showing it to somebody. I was paying it forward, if you will. And that was back in like 2003, and I honestly don't think I've watched it since then.
Yeah, the last time I had watched it was actually when my wife and I were dating, which was...
like 7 or 8 years ago?
7 to 8 years ago. Yeah. So it had been a while.
So there's a couple things I picked up on, but I also don't think that I'll be able to go through the movie as well as we have been with these other movies, because I haven't... like, the superhero movies I watch all the time, and I'll rewatch all the time, and I know those movies pretty well. This movie, the sequence of events, I might get a little off.
Yeah, so...
But to start the film, like, right away, he goes to the cabin with his girlfriend Linda, and she gets, I guess, possessed, kind of, by this evil force, and he, within the first 6 minutes or so, cuts her head off with a shovel, and then buries her body with really, like, he doesn't care. He's just like, I mean, he cares, but it's just like, this is what you do to dead people in the woods, I guess. You just bury them. You don't call police or anything.
That's actually a scene from
the first
The
one.
Evil Dead. Yeah.
Right. With the cross headstone type thing. Right. So anyway, he buries her, and she comes back. Now, in this movie, it seems like it's only a matter of minutes, maybe a matter of hours if he gets knocked out or something. Because he does that's after he gets hit by the evil force and gets taken through the woods and is being twirled around in the woods. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt and say he's been sleeping there for a couple of hours. So when he comes back to the cabin, Linda rises from the dead, headless. And she is a decaying corpse. Like, she is practically skin and bones. There's nothing left of her. And I was thinking, wow, her body decayed a lot in a very short period of time.
It's true. I mean, she was zombie-esque when he buried her, chopped off her head and stuff.
Right.
But no, she wasn't decaying, and she wasn't, her muscle tissue and stuff had not been deteriorated like that.
So I don't know why they chose to make the dummy version of Linda, even if it was like kind of... They did a lot of the stop motion kind of animation in it, like the kind of the Ray Harryhausen type stuff. And I know some of that was in that scene. And I don't know why they decided to make her so decayed rather than just making like a model of the actress's actual body or something.
Could have been for scare effect, a little bit more eerie to see.
Make it a little creepier, yeah.
Yeah, like a half skeleton, like.
Right.
That was a very weird scene, by the way.
Where it's like dancing around and like the head rolls backwards up back onto the body.
Dancing and laughing and.
Yeah. Again, like I said, I hadn't seen the movie in so long. I knew I'd always classified the movie as a horror comedy. Whenever I talked to somebody about it, or if somebody asked me about it, which isn't that often. But watching it today, I would say it's even more so a comedy horror. Like, it almost belongs in the comedy section more than the horror section of a video rental store. And watching it today, I remembered, I've read Bruce Campbell's book, the first book he wrote, called If Chins Could Kill, which is essentially an autobiography, and he talks a lot about the making of the original Evil Dead. But he talks also about him and Sam Raimi growing up and how huge fans they were of the Three Stooges. And I feel like that type of comedy is what they're trying to recreate in Evil Dead 2. Mm-hmm. It's like very much Three Stooges comedy, but with corpses and evil witches and stuff.
Yeah, I think they alluded to that in the article that I read today.
Yeah, they did. Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it was very, very interesting. Why did they go that route, like the comedy route, to begin with?
Well, the article that we read today, I'll put the link to the article in the description of the episode so people can read it too. Mm-hmm. But they talked about how they wanted to make a slapstick comedy, but they also wanted it to be seen by a lot of people, and I think horror was really big in the mid-'80s. I mean, we had like the Friday the 13th movies, The Nightmare on Elm Streets, so they figured the best way to do it is to make a slapstick horror, and then hopefully maybe it'll get into theaters and be seen. And I looked up the how much this movie made in theaters, and it made $5 million. So it made twice as much as Evil Dead 1, but $5 million is not a whole lot in comparison to like how much movies are making. I mean, granted, you have to adjust for inflation, but $5 million just seems like a low number to me. But I don't know what the production budget was for this one.
Right, but I don't think horror films
make a lot of money in general.
Right, so that probably wasn't a bad price. Not to mention, movies are making so much more today because of ticket prices.
3D, IMAX.
You have the internet, which is, able to advertise to a huge, group of people now.
Right.
Which, back then, it was word of mouth or going to go see it. I mean, did they even have TV or trailers on television?
Like TV spots?
Back then? Yeah.
I think they did, yeah. I'm sure they had TV commercials for movies.
But would they have put would they have put Evil Dead 2 on a TV spot?
Probably not. I don't know. It's it really just comes down to whether or not they had the money to show a commercial on TV. But I wouldn't be surprised if they didn't advertise on TV. It's probably all newspaper ads or trailers in front of other movies, probably.
So I bet that was considered as a semi-success, at least.
Right.
To go back to the production about the movie again, something that really cracked me up in that article was Bruce Campbell talking about them writing it, like I guess in their house, because they were roommates, weren't they?
That's how it sounded in that article. I didn't know if Bruce Campbell and Sam Raimi were roommates, but
anyway, it said that they were downstairs writing, and Bruce Campbell was upstairs, and he'd hear them downstairs like cracking up, and he was like, "Are they even working? We're doing a horror film, and they're down there laughing."
And they said it was just insane. Every page they turned, like, I guess they would like show the other people, because I think Bruce Campbell's a producer on the film too. They would show the other people involved with the movie, like their pages for the day that they had written or whatever, and they'd be like, "We can't do this." Like, it was just like you said. I think you said that earlier. It was just in their eyes, it was just ridiculous. Like, what were they thinking?
Understandably, I'm sure I would have been thinking the same thing back then. Luckily for them, it turned out really well.
Mm-hmm. And luckily for us, it turned out pretty well.
Yeah.
I've never been a huge fanatic for the Evil Dead movies. I've always liked them, but I've never really loved them. I do like the character of Ash, and I love Ash in the last 15 minutes of this movie. When I wrote a note, don't mean to jump ahead, but like when he puts the chainsaw on his wrist and it shows them like suiting up like you would see in like a Joel Schumacher Batman type film,
Right.
That to me is like the birth of the Ash that that most people think of when they think of Ash.
Right.
And right after that, he as soon as he puts the gun on his back, harness or whatever, the camera comes up close to him and he just goes groovy.
Yeah.
And that was the beginning of Ash.
Yeah.
Which is unfortunate. It's kind of the end of this movie, but it makes for a really good third movie, Army of Darkness. So.
When you see him become that character and you go back and watch how he was acting beforehand, you could see that he was growing towards Ash.
Right.
The Ash that we know. But yeah, that was the moment where it was kind of like Spider-Man putting on his suit.
Right, yeah, exactly. It was kind of him becoming a superhero in a way, sort of.
Yeah. So two of the major characters in the movie are the daughter of the professor, I believe he was, that had been researching these
the
spiritual, the Necronomicon, and she was trying to. She was trying to call them, I guess, at their cabin, and they weren't answering, and she was concerned about them?
I believe she left to... I actually don't know why she left, but I think she was originally at the cabin with them. She left, I think, to find the missing pages from the Necronomicon.
Mm-hmm.
And she returns with the missing pages, and so she knows that her family's at the cabin, but there's no phone at the cabin, so there's no way for her to get in touch with them. And little does she know that her family is no longer at the cabin, or is the woman under the floor, the woman in the basement, if you will, is she her mom who's been possessed? That's what I thought.
Yeah.
So what happened to her dad? Her dad just disappeared, or that part?
Yeah, I don't think they ever.
Oh, he's like a ghost at the end. He delivers a message to them at the end.
Oh, that's right.
I forgot.
But that was the thing that kind of beforehand, I believe he said he buried his wife in the cellar.
Right.
So we knew that was her. And before the spiritual communication, we didn't know what had happened to him.
Mm-hmm.
The daughter's name was Annie, I believe, and she has I guess it's a boyfriend named Ed, and they're going back to the cabin. I really think that they couldn't get a hold of them.
They couldn't. Well, I know that he said when he picks her up from the airport, I think she asks him if he's talked to her father, and he's like, not in about a week. There's no phones at the cabin. And then he's like, it's about an hour drive from here. I'll take you there myself or something.
Mm-hmm. So they're on their way. The bridge to the cabin has been destroyed, and they run across these two people, Jake and Bobby Joe.
Mm-hmm.
What was he doing? Oh, he was setting up the
barrier. Roadblock, yeah.
Yeah.
So that people wouldn't, I guess, fly off the road into the cavernous.
Right. So he tells them that he knows another way, and Bobby Joe comes along, which is his girlfriend. And they get to the cabin.
Who I found out today in that article, and also on IMDb, that Sam Raimi originally wanted Holly Hunter to play Bobby Joe.
Mm-hmm.
And apparently the producer, Rob Tapert, wanted someone who he thought was prettier.
Did they say that?
He said they wanted a babe, and I guess he didn't think Holly Hunter was a babe.
I gotcha. I thought Sam Raimi had just said he wanted a babe, and they were like, well, we really are enamored with this girl, but I didn't necessarily take it as they thought she was a babe. But maybe they did. Anyway, that's who was cast, and they get to the cabin, and they run into Ash, who is in the cabin.
Right.
And
it's never explained, whose cabin it really is. Is it the people who... Is it the professors and Ash knows about it? They never explain why
I don't think
both
they did.
parties are at the same cabin.
In the first film, I think they might have said something about they knew the people.
Right.
I can't remember. Anyway, yeah, he in the beginning of this film, Linda, Ash's girlfriend, brings up something about, what if they come back? And he's like, they're not going to come back. So obviously these people don't know that Ash and Linda are staying in their
right.
cabin. But the daughter comes in and sees blood all over the place. Ash has...
With a chainsaw. There's a chainsaw in the corner with blood on it.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think he had a shotgun, too.
Yeah, we've skipped over... I mean, when Linda comes back to life, he has to basically cut her up with the chainsaw. He puts...
That's
he
right.
gets... She bite... Her headless body is running around, and he's holding her head, and her head bites his hand. And in order to get the hand off of his... or the head off of his hand, he puts her head in a vice and figures the only way to stop her is to chainsaw through her head.
That's right. Yeah, he loses his hand before they even show up. So yeah, I did skip a major part.
Yeah, well, that's all right. Like
I
said,
definitely want to talk about the hand.
I do want to talk about the hand because I think it's great. It sounds silly, but I think it's great acting on Bruce Campbell's part because he has to. I mean, he does really a good job of making the hand seem like it's doing its own thing.
Yeah, it was crazy. I was watching that and I was like, man, that looks like you said, like it's alive. And he's just like looking around the room and the hand's like doing its own thing. It's crazy. Good job.
And the
Bruce
footage in the scene where it's smashing the plates over his head was sped up, and you could tell that he had like dubbed over a lot of his like "oh no" type of acting. But it's still really funny, and I love that they gave the hand a little voice. So like when he finally is knocked out, the hand sees the cleaver, the meat cleaver on the floor a few feet away, and you could just hear it being like, "oh, da, 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 ah." And it starts dragging the body towards the meat cleaver.
Which was amazing also.
Yeah.
When he's dragging, and Bruce Campbell's body is just slight. I mean, they had to do something with it, like be pushing
that's what I was
his
wondering
feet
too.
or something.
I wondered if they had like people off frame pushing his body forward or how they did that exactly.
Yeah. But it looked great. And then he stabs the hand. Was it with a knife?
It was with another knife, yeah. It was like right before it gets to the meat cleaver, he stabs it with a knife.
What was his line? It was awesome. He goes, "That's right," after he stabs it. "Who's laughing now?" "Who's laughing now?"
To his own hand.
To his own hand. Oh, the one-liners in this are awesome.
It's pretty good.
Then he chops it off.
Got to.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it'll just continue to try to kill him.
Does he use the butcher?
Even after he chops it off, it still continues to try to kill him.
Right. Then the hands, it's still running around.
Right, and this is one of my favorite parts. He grabs a bucket and puts a bucket over top of it, and then he grabs a bunch of books, and the top book is Ernest Hemingway's A Farewell to Arms. That sits on the top of the pile of books.
I noticed it was Ernest Hemingway, but I didn't link the title. That's awesome.
Yeah. I thought that was really funny. A Farewell to Arms after he cuts off his own hand and then puts it in a bucket.
But the best part of that scene when the hand's going around and then it goes into the mouse hole.
Yeah.
And he's like locating where he is in the wall and then fires. And he goes, "Gotcha, didn't I, you little sucker?" And then you just have an eruption of blood, like a geyser, just going into his mouth and all over his body. That was hilarious.
Yeah, I remember that scene watching it for the first time, and I think I just shook my head. I was just like, "What is happening?" I constantly probably asked that.
This was probably the moment. I mean, if they hadn't already with the dancing and everything, this was probably the moment where the audience was like cracking up and going, "Is this supposed to be funny? Because this is hilarious."
Yeah. Hopefully by this point they knew it was meant to be funny.
That's true. You have the dish breaking on the head.
Right. The hand punching himself and everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. I would hope that they would know it was a comedy by this point.
So after that, then we do get to
the other people arriving.
Yeah. Annie and Ed and Jake
and Bobby Joe.
And they lock Ash down in the cellar because Annie's convinced that Ash has murdered her parents.
Right.
But doesn't have any reasons as to why they just lock him down there.
Well, the fact that her family is nowhere to be found, and there's a bloody chainsaw in the corner.
Well, but I mean, like, why? But like, as to why would this guy have killed my parents?
Sure. Well, it's maybe they didn't. They figured maybe they needed to lock up the chainsaw murdering suspect before asking him questions.
Right. So he's down there, and then is that when Henrietta, her mom, comes up and yeah, because he's like freaking out.
There's really no reason she comes out. The tape goes. He's like, Henrietta tried to kill me, and then somehow he kills her, I guess, because she's been possessed by a Kandarian demon. And he's like, so I buried her. I buried her in the cellar. And right after he says that, she pops out of the ground, and that's when Ash does his great scream right then. So there's really no reason she pops out. It's just the fact that she was just waiting for him to say in the cellar so that she could pop out.
Right. So Ash is trying to get out of the cellar now. He's freaking out. And why did they let him out?
I think they let him out because it looks like they just pull him out right before the demon Henrietta grabs him. So it's like they just spare his life, basically.
But how did they know she's down there?
They heard her. As soon as she pops out of the ground and he starts screaming, they say, there's someone else down there with him.
That's right.
And then he climbs up the ladder and he's like, let me out. And they are trying to get the key in the lock type thing, and she's getting closer and closer to Ash. It's supposed to be kind of suspenseful, I think.
It was suspenseful. I thought. That was the interesting thing about Evil Dead 2 was, like you said, it's comedy horror, but there were some scary moments.
Yeah, I was thinking about that, how, like, I wonder if anybody in 1987 thought that it was like a quote-unquote scary movie. Because I don't know how many people would think that now, because a lot of the effects are kind of outdated and whatnot. But I think if I had seen it when I was younger, like, 8, 9, 10 maybe, I just think some of the makeup effects actually would have creeped me out. Like when Ed, is that Annie's boyfriend's name? Mm-hmm. Yeah. When Ed gets possessed, like the face that he's got, like the makeup on his face, I think is super creepy. And he takes a bite of her hair and then like swallows her hair. Like that part is just weird. It's like it's creepily scary, I think.
Yeah. And Henrietta.
Oh yeah. She's got like the kind of like there's almost like a film over her eyes, and she's real.
Especially when she comes out of the cellar.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, she's just gross.
Mm-hmm.
She's like this fat, old, naked lady.
Right. I think a lot of the budget, whatever the budget was for this movie, went into makeup effects.
Right.
And probably fake blood. Although, when they're doing like the gallons and gallons of fake blood, the first time when it's coming out of the wall, that actually looks pretty good. But when it's coming out of the floor, if you remember that near the end of the movie, that just looks like Kool-Aid to me. Like, it doesn't look like blood. It's like almost pink water. Kinda.
Yeah. And I think that was the way that a lot of the blood was done, though, back then for horror films. So it probably didn't, people weren't thinking too much about it because that's typically the blood that they saw.
Right. I think this movie went for shocking, maybe more so than scary.
Mm-hmm.
Like the DVD cover I have, I think it's talks about how like gory it is or something. And I wouldn't really say it's gory by today's standards, really. But it's got a lot of blood, and like it does have some, like there's a scene where they like stomp out Henrietta's face or something, and it shoots an eyeball out into Bobby Joe's mouth.
Right.
So it's got like things like that, but I wouldn't necessarily go as far to say it's gory, and none of it really looks all that realistic either.
Right. It's definitely 80s gore, and I remember telling you that I remembered it being really gory, and I mean it is gory, but it wasn't as gory as I remembered.
Right.
I thought I remembered just some of the most disgusting gory stuff I'd ever seen.
Mm-hmm. The new Evil Dead is actually incredibly gory. The remake.
Was Sam Raimi?
He produced it.
Yeah,
Bruce Campbell and Sam Raimi produced the new one.
I was really hoping for a Evil Dead 4.
You know what, man? Back in like the late 90s, I want to say, or maybe early 2000s, right after Freddy vs. Jason came out, there were rumors that there was going to be a sequel, and it was going to be Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash.
Yep.
And I think Bruce Campbell would have still been at a pretty good age to play Ash at that point. And I so wanted that to happen because I think that would have been awesome. I have no idea what the story would have been, but I just think it would have been cool to have him battling those two characters.
Right. Well, the interesting thing is in Jason Goes to Hell, the Necronomicon is in that movie.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's like on the book, or it's on a table, and I think they just kind of pick it up and look at it. They don't look through it, but I mean, it's the Necronomicon,
right? I think they had a lot of ideas. I think for what they wanted to do with those franchises. I guess the original ending for Freddy vs. Jason was they were gonna. I guess in the middle of the fight, I don't know if they were going to go down into hell or what, but wherever they were fighting, Pinhead from Hellraiser was going to show up and like break up the fight, and like that was going to be the very end of the movie, and say like I can't remember what the line was that he was going to say, but it was going to end with Pinhead showing up. But they ultimately scrapped it because they said that they felt like they needed to have a winner. They couldn't just let the fight stop by a third person. But I think they copped out on that too, not to spoil Freddy vs. Jason, but there's sort of a winner, but then it's hinted at the very end that the other one is like it's hinted at a sequel, basically.
Mm-hmm. And speaking of the Necronomicon being in Jason vs. Hell, that not to spoil Jason vs. Hell either. Jason vs. Hell. Jason goes to hell.
Yeah.
But Freddy Krueger's hand.
Yeah.
Reaches
That's
up
the best part of that movie.
Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen, I'm assuming, Jason Goes to Hell then, right?
Yeah.
That movie's terrible. Like, it's my least favorite out of the Friday the 13th movies.
More than X?
Yes. X is at least funny.
Interesting. I remember I wasn't that... I mean, it wasn't good like a Friday the 13th movie, but I didn't remember thinking it was the worst one by any means.
Well, I mean, I haven't seen it in a long time, and maybe there's... I mean, I remember Friday the 13th part 6 or 7. The one that the girl has, like, the telekinetic powers. That one was really bad. And I remember Jason Goes to Hell being really bad. And part of my problem with Jason Goes to Hell is that Jason's not really in it. He's like, his soul or whatever is possessing a lot of people's bodies. So it's like there's a lot of people acting as Jason, but it's not.
I gotcha.
Jason. But that scene at the very end of Jason Goes to Hell where Freddy Krueger's glove comes up and grabs Jason's masks and pulls it down into the ground, I remember hearing about that when I was a kid. I was way too young to even see those movies.
Yeah, me too.
And I don't remember where I heard it from or what, but I remember hearing that, like, Freddy Krueger grabbed Jason's mask at the end of Jason Goes to Hell, and I was like, I don't think I had even seen any of them, but I knew who Freddy Krueger was. You knew who Freddy Krueger and who Jason were, and so that, just the fact that they could be in the same movie together, I remember thinking, like, that's so cool.
Right.
So to see Freddy versus Jason versus Ash would have been amazing.
Yeah, Another one that I heard was Freddy vs. Jason versus the Ghostbusters.
Oh, that would have been interesting.
Yeah.
That would have been a really... the Ghostbusters, I think, would have felt so out of place because Freddy and Jason are so horrible. Not horrible like terrible characters, but like they're evil, evil beings.
Right.
It would have been like way out of... I think the Ghostbusters would have been way in over their head to be up against Freddy Krueger and Jason.
Yeah, the Ash one makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. And you'd have to have Ash win that movie.
Of course.
You have to.
It's Ash. I mean, he doesn't lose. He's the king.
That's right.
So, I guess let's get back to Evil Dead 2.
There's a scene where Bobby Joe ends up like running out of the house, right? And there's a scene that's very reminiscent to Evil Dead 1, where she gets wrapped up in the trees and the twigs and vines. And in this one, she just gets dragged away. But in the first one, it's a little bit more graphic than that.
Yeah. And that leads Jake to take Ash and Annie hostage.
Right.
Until they go out and...
To look for Bobby Joe.
To look for him. So they go in the woods, right? He actually gets them to go out in the woods. And the thing starts coming after him. The camera. And I believe Ash and Annie run back inside. Don't they?
That's when Ash gets possessed. Camera's going towards Bobby Joe, doesn't hit him. You're kind of wondering...
You mean
I saw
Jake?
the evil force go towards him. Sorry, Jake. I saw it go towards him, but it didn't hit him. What happened? And then possessed Ash pops up out of the bottom of the screen.
Okay.
And that's when they run back inside. Or that's at least when Annie runs back inside. And then Ash is trying to get in. And I think he becomes unpossessed when he finds Linda's necklace. I think that's how he becomes unpossessed, which is a little weird. There's a scene in this movie that I've never noticed before, and it's almost like your scene from Iron Man last week. I have no idea how I missed this, and I feel stupid about it because it's huge. And it's when Annie and Ash are looking at the pages from the Necronomicon that she has just brought from whatever country she was in. And there's a drawing of Ash with a chainsaw hand. And he's like, "Who's that?" And they say that's the hero from the sky who came and got rid of the evil.
Actually,
he's like, he didn't do a very good job.
I know. Yeah, but he actually doesn't have a chainsaw. He has the the spiked ball.
I thought it was a chainsaw in his hand.
Mm-mm.
I'm gonna look at it, but I never noticed before that they foreshadowed the end of this movie and essentially Army of Darkness. I picked up on that this viewing and never before, and I feel stupid for having missed it.
We were talking about them going out into the woods.
Right, and so Ash gets possessed, and Jake gets hurt in the process, and Annie drags Jake into the living room where Henrietta reaches up and grabs his head from underneath the cellar door, or I guess she reaches out from the cellar door, grabs his head, tries to drag him down into the cellar, and Annie tries to stop it. But it fails, and he gets pretty much torn apart, and all of his blood comes geysering out of the bottom of the floor.
If I remember,
so
it kind of looked like a meat grinder.
Yeah, kind of, yeah. Well, it was really just, she was going to get hit with all the blood. She was sitting there, and they were just like, we're just going to shoot all this bloody water at you, if that's cool. So now it's just down to Annie and Ash. And they know they've got to do something. And I think one of the things they know they've got to do is kill the witch that they call her, Henrietta, down in the cellar.
Mm-hmm.
I think they have to. I guess they have to kill her, and then they have to recite a saying from the pages that she's been trying to translate.
Right.
For the evil to stop. So they figured the best way to do this, which is the best part of the movie, is to rig the chainsaw so that it can be attached to Ash's handless arm. And so for the last 15 minutes of the movie or so, he's got a chainsaw for a hand, and he's a cool character when he's got the shotgun on his back, He's got a chainsaw for a hand. And I don't think they ever thought that when they were writing this slapstick movie that character with the chainsaw hand would become as iconic, I think, as it is now.
Right. Yeah, they were just hoping this thing was going to be likable.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, he becomes like a icon, like Arnold Schwarzenegger from Terminator kind of deal. And, yeah, he just... I love the character of Ash.
I do, too.
A guy with a chainsaw on his arm. And I'd forgotten that, no, he doesn't do it with... He actually creates something on his chest to put the starter handle in.
I forgot about that, too.
But
so that he can just, like, drop it in there and then move his arm away and it will pull the...
Right.
I don't know why he can't just do it with his other hand. I guess to hold the gun in, so that way he doesn't have to do it. He can just do it with one arm if need be.
Exactly. But when he earlier when he was chainsawing Linda's head, he did it with his teeth.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, he took his teeth and pulled and started the chainsaw.
Oh, wow. Maybe it hurt his teeth, so he's like, I can't do that again.
right. So that's pretty much towards the end of the movie.
Henrietta comes out of the cellar, and then he starts waving his chainsaw arm, and you see limbs just flying across the screen. And then he finally cuts her head off. And then the evil forces get really kind of mad, and the trees kind of come to life, and there's like this weird plant being thing trying to eat the house. And Annie starts to recite the passage that she needs to recite, and the possessed hand, Ash's old hand, stabs her in the back with like that weird looking, it almost looks like a spine, but it's like a knife.
Right, has the skull on the handle.
And so I think she manages to kind of maybe get a few more sentences out right before she dies, which causes the pandemonium to stop. But since she didn't translate the whole message, that's when the vortex opens up outside the door and things start getting sucked in, and we don't know exactly where it leads, but like trees are getting sucked into it, furniture from the house. Ash is hanging onto the counter and his like feet are, it's like a tornado type thing.
You're right, and Sam Raimi's car actually gets taken into the vortex, which answered my question: where was the car in Army of Darkness? It was obviously in the medieval times.
Yep. And that I actually meant to mention that's the same car that Uncle Ben drives in Spider-Man.
Yeah.
And so Ash ends up can't hang on any longer, and he gets sucked into the vortex, and he ends up in medieval times. And there's a demon flying around out there, just happens to be, I guess. And he, quickly goes into action and shoots it with his shotgun. And then everybody, the first knight that actually speaks up, he opens up his helmet. Mm-hmm. He opens up his helmet, and I don't remember the line exactly, but he's like, "Hail to the one who rescued us." That's actually Sam Raimi.
Is it really?
Who said that?
I did not pick up on that.
He looks a little different because he's he's like 30 years younger.
Right.
But I'm pretty sure that's Sam Raimi.
Another thing is in that article, and I didn't know this. Apparently, or Henrietta is Ted Raimi.
Yeah, when he's possessed, I think, or. I'm a little confused by that, because every now and again Henrietta becomes like this puppet on a stick that looks like, like her like neck is like super long, and she has kind of a weird triangular face.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering if Ted Raimi is the one operating that, or if he's the old woman in the makeup.
I think
he's the one flying across the room.
Right. I think he's the old lady in the makeup, because the article says that his feet would sweat into the feet
costume. Okay.
And it would be like they'd put baking powder on his feet beforehand, and then when they'd take them off, it was like a paste of sweat and baking powder.
Good old Ted Raimi.
So, with the medieval times, I mean, were they planning for Army of Darkness?
If you'd asked me earlier today, I probably would have said yes, but after reading that article, I don't think they had any plans to do a third one. I think they were just trying to make a slapstick horror movie that maybe had a kind of a shocking ending.
That's true.
Ends up in medieval times.
he just does the Darth Vader. No.
Yeah. So I really don't think they planned on doing a third one, and then obviously along the way they started talking about like what Ash could do in Army of Darkness, and decided to do a third one. And I'll need to rewatch Army of Darkness again because I think I used to think Evil Dead 2 was my favorite, but I think Army of Darkness might be my favorite.
Yeah, I was going to say, you said that you like the Evil Dead series, but you don't love it.
Mm-hmm.
And I was going to say, I agree with you, but I love Army of Darkness.
Oh, really?
Army of Darkness is great.
Yeah.
And it's by far the best in the trilogy.
Okay, cool. Well, what would you grade Evil Dead 2, John?
Well, like I said, I'm changing my scale to 5-star scale with half stars. And I want to elaborate on that a little bit more. 3 stars for me, just like Netflix says, I like it.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, probably more 3.5 is like. 4 is, I really liked it. You know, it's above average.
4.5 is you loved it.
4.5
5 is like
this was
master.
Great, not perfect, but it was pretty close. And then 5 is just wow,
almost unobtainable.
Right,
it's the masterpiece.
So explaining that, I would give Evil Dead 2 a probably 3 stars.
Yeah, I'm gonna go with a solid B, which is pretty much perfect for this movie because I would consider it a B movie. You know?
Yeah. The thing that might bump it up to 3.5 for me is just Ash with the chainsaw hand.
Right.
I mean,
right.
that just, it's amazing. Yeah.
And actually, I remember seeing Army of Darkness for the first time and being a little disappointed that he gets rid of his chainsaw hand so early on.
Me too. But Army of Darkness is so good that it's forgivable.
Well, let us know what you thought about Evil Dead. You can give us a comment on cinemaheroes.com. You can email us, Justin at cinemaheroes.com or John at cinemaheroes.com. You can throw us a line on Twitter at cinemaheroes, or you can go to Facebook, facebook.com/SM&SM podcast. I'd actually like to know if anybody, if you like or dislike the fact that we have 2 different rating systems. John uses the 5-star rating system, and I use the letter grade rating system. And if you would prefer us to use just one, I can do the 5-star rating system, perhaps. But I kind of like that we do it differently.
Yeah, I agree.
But I'm curious about anybody else.
Mm-hmm.
So let us know.
Also, if there's any suggestions
for movies or anything, Mm-hmm.
Well, as to what you like about our podcast.
Yeah, feedback. Obviously, we would love to get feedback from anybody. So, yeah. And as always, if you're making any Amazon purchases in the future, check out cinemaheroes.com first. Click the Amazon banner. We'd really appreciate it. We'll get a small, tiny percentage. Doesn't cost you anything more. So
laptops, remember.
Right, only laptops. No, you don't have to buy it. You can buy anything.
Anything, but make sure you purchase over $1,000. That's what we're looking for here.
Yeah, you can purchase anything as long as it costs more than $700. Just $700 worth of bubble gum is fine.
Yeah. I'm John Pilzel.
I'm Justin Speck. Thanks for listening.